Maggie O'Halloran. I'm one of the educators at the Florida School of Holistic Living, and we're going to talk about peppermint today. Peppermint in the Lamiaceae family, Mentha piperita. It has a long history of use. Stick around if you want to find out about some of those uses and how to grow it. I mentioned I am Maggie O'Halloran here in Central Florida, the location of our Florida School of Holistic Living, and my home, backyard urban oasis, as some of my friends like to call it. I'm really close to downtown Orlando, and you might hear that a few times on this video with the sounds of the cars or air conditioning units or what have you. We are in the city. That's one thing I really love about spending time with you and here in YouTube land. It's really nice to be able to connect with you from my urban garden and let you know how easy it is to grow things in small spaces like our little tiny backyard here. Peppermint that we'll be talking about today has a long traditions and history of use in traditional Chinese medicine as well as Western herbal medicine, which I am a part of, Western herbal medicine. And in these traditions, it's generally considered cooling. It has a secondary action that in traditional Chinese medicine it's called warming. It is my understanding that that warming has to do with the way it moves through the body. Peppermint is a wonderful cerebral stimulant. There's been some really fantastic studies out of Johns Hopkins University on how the scent of peppermint can really help to boost your mental clarity and ability to focus. So try sniffing some peppermint in the afternoon instead of having that cup of coffee. So it also has a long history of use as a carminative. And a carminative is just a fancy way of saying that it helps you with digestion. It helps you burp instead of fart is what I like to say. And there's nothing wrong with farting. It's definitely a part of digestion. But carminative just means that it helps with digestion. It has a relaxing effect on the stomach and the digestive tract. So if you experience GERD, then you should avoid peppermint because it can relax those already relaxed sphincters at the top of the stomach. So be mindful of that. Otherwise, peppermint can be really nice after a meal just to settle the stomach. A lot of people really like to have it at the end of the day. It does have some relaxing qualities. It can also be applied topically. It has some analgesic actions. And stick around, I'm going to show you one of my favorite ways of accessing that analgesic topical application. It also can be antispasmodic, and it is considered a stimulating diaphoretic, which means it helps you sweat. Sweating can be really helpful if you are experiencing fever. Now, this video or any information that comes out of the school should not be substitute for any medical advice that you might need, but it is my opinion, just opinion, not medical opinion, that fever can be beneficial on the body. So just be mindful in the way that you interact with fever. It's your body's natural way of fighting off cooties. But peppermint is a part of a blend of herbs that we'll talk about in a few minutes whenever I talk about working with it as a tea. Until then, let's take a look at it growing right here in my garden. We have a beautiful day. Florida fall. Only 80 degrees. It's starting to dry out. So this is the time of year that I start to water plants that are a little bit more sensitive to the dry season that we have here in Central Florida. Peppermint is one of those plants that I'll start to water soon. It really likes moisture, but it doesn't like to be sitting in moisture. There are a lot of plants in the mint family that can be okay with a little bit more moisture, but I have peppermint here in a clay pot for a couple of reasons. One of them is that I want to make sure that the soil gets to really drain. It is in the Florida sandy soil, so that water will drain out pretty easily. okra and yarrow and chickweed and garlic and all the other things, the peppermint would take over. Peppermint is low growing and herbaceous. So when we talk about herbs, we're often talking about plants that are not necessarily herbaceous. And herbaceous means that it grows freely, it grows low to the ground, and peppermint definitely does that. So if you come in a little closer, I'd like to show you some of the wonderful aspects of this plant that really helps you know which one you're working with. One is that it has a square stem. So whenever I'm rolling my fingers like this, I can feel that it is square. That's the way that it grows. And your mint, most of your mint family plants are going to have that nice square stem. The leaves growing on the stem are opposite of each other. And you can see the leaf margin. And peppermint is really delicious. I like to just nibble some of those leaves. And the best way to propagate it is by cutting. I've never had peppermint grow from seed. It's always been from cutting or a small plant that I've gotten from a friend or a nursery. And the way that I take a cutting is the same way I would harvest a little bit for tea. With peppermint, I'm also making sure, I also have it in a pot because in Florida, it really prefers to be out of the direct sun during the summertime. But would really like to be in a little bit more sun during the winter. So I often harvest a little bit for tea by coming out and taking any of the parts that are on leggy vines that are getting longer. I also want to help it stay inside the pot. Sometimes it'll try to escape the pot by growing really long. And by harvesting it, I'm letting it know I want to use it, and it'll grow more full and bushy and be happy throughout our winter here in Florida. Yum, smells so good. Anybody else wish we had some Wonka vision right now where you could just smell what was coming through the screen? Okay. Make sure to ask any questions. Let us know how you can hear us. Are you growing mint? Let me know in the comments. Okay, I have my peppermint here. And if I am making tea, I would just crumple these up and put them into whatever container I'm going to use for that tea. But I thought I'd start by showing you a couple of other preparations that I like to incorporate in my life with peppermint. First, I like to start it as a cutting in my container here, and I will simply take off any leaves that are growing below what I will imagine the water line to be. I'm just using my sharp fingernails to trim those leaves as close to the stem as possible, and then I'll put it into my jar. Here's your water. And then make sure I keep my container filled with enough water so that peppermint could start more roots. The best stems for taking a cutting and to start are going to be the lighter green. When they get darker brown, they're less likely to root. The lighter green stem is more likely to start a root. Whenever they're darker brown, the stem is harder. It's not very likely it will give you roots. Water. I'll have some roots going in no time, and I'll have a peppermint plant to give to a friend for the new year. The rest I'll use to make steam, tea, fermentation. Anytime I'm working with a peppermint or any other plant material where I'm harvesting the aerial roots, I'm planning to use the stem and everything in my tea or steam. I take the plant material and I just crumble it up a little bit. That breaking it up offers the plant an opportunity for those cells to open up and really access the aromatic qualities of that plant. It's the essential oils or the aromatic qualities that really help peppermint do its thing in the body. So for peppermint tea, I would put 1 to 3 teaspoons of plant material if it's dry. For the fresh stuff, if I were making tea, I would use 1 to 3 tablespoons. So teaspoon for dried, tablespoon for fresh. So that I would just put into my container. I'd add my hot water. I'd let it steep 15 to 20 minutes. I'd strain it, and I'd drink a lovely cup of tea. Making an herbal steam is really similar to that process, only I would use more plant material. I'd stick with that 3 tablespoons per cup. I have more water that will go into this container. I would pour the hot water in. I'd make sure it wasn't too hot for me, and if I had some congestion or just wanted to wake up my sinuses, I'd have the hot water and I'd make sure it wasn't too hot. I'd put the towel over my head and breathe deeply. Lovely. Make sure you have your tissues nearby because it really helps to open up those sinuses and get things moving in the wonderful way that peppermint can. Just remember that you don't want it to be too hot. So we talked about tea, we talked about steam. The next way I like to incorporate peppermint into my life is as a fomentation. A fomentation is just a way of saying I take the liquid from that infusion or where the water was sitting with the plant material. I strain out the plant material and then I dip a cloth into the liquid and let it soak it up, and then apply that towel that's soaked in the plant liquid to the place where I want it to do its thing. So sunburn, nice cooling sensation of peppermint can be really nice. I do live in Florida and I sunburn very easily, and so sometimes it can be really helpful to have that around. It has that nice analgesic quality with the peppermint, so it helps to soothe that sunburn. I might also use the fomentation method if I have a headache, especially if that headache is caused by tension. You know, I've been researching all day long and I'm feeling like I have a little bit of a headache. Maybe my eyes have been squinting a little bit. I'm just feeling congestion in my head. Peppermint fomentation applied to my head can be really nice to soothe that, cool everything down, get the blood moving again. Getting outside to do that can be even more fun for me. if you're looking for a book resource, I want to recommend Rosalie de la Forêt has this book, Alchemy of Herbs, where she talks about not just the historical uses of mint, but the lovely ways that you can incorporate mint into your life beyond the tea or the fermentation. She has other recipes, how you can incorporate mint into your life to cool down. Thank you for joining us for this talk about peppermint. Thank you for joining me in my garden as we talked about this wonderful peppermint that grows really well from cutting. I'm going to let this peppermint cutting stay in the water for a couple of weeks. After a couple of weeks, you can come in, I'll show you. After a couple of weeks, any place where you see nodes, that's where I took the leaves off, you would likely find little white roots coming out, and those roots are really delicate and sensitive, and they're accustomed to not having to work very much to move out and grow. So when you decide to put the peppermint cutting that has those little roots in it into soil, make sure you keep the soil moist for a couple more weeks after that, so that those roots have a chance to really thrive and have an easy way of getting deeper into the soil, so it could manage getting dried out a little bit more. Any questions? Make sure to comment below with any questions, and stick around. We're going to have a YouTube just like this available to you that will be specifically on working with peppermint and tea blends, so watch for that. If you want to get deeper into herbalism and really understand how herbalist traditions have used these plants and plant materials for long periods of time, check out our Roots of Herbalism program, available on our website. And as always, please comment below with any questions that you have, or reach out to me at maggie@holisticlivingschool.org, or anyone at our office at office@holisticlivingschool.org. Thank you for joining me in my garden this afternoon. I enjoy spending time with you, and I'll see you next time.